afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Read Aloud. Thanks so much for coming out on a rainy day, and I'm sure you'll be glad you did because we've got a wonderful program coming up. We've got two professors from the Department of English, Erin McGraw and Andrew Hudgens, pardon me. And they're each going to read from one of their recent books. There are coffee cups in the back. If you would like to help yourself to tea or coffee, please do so. And otherwise, just relax and enjoy the readings.
All right, how are we on sound? We good? More sound. Much more, way more sound. All right. As Donna said, thank you for coming out on a rainy afternoon. It's good to see you. Hi, Jason. Haven't seen you in a while. I'm going to read from the opening chapter of my latest novel called The Seamstress of Hollywood Boulevard. It's based on the life of my father's mother, my paternal grandmother. And as I was working on this book, my father was insanely excited that I was writing this. He was out of his mind. And he did read the book, but he died 2 days before it was officially published. And so I start my readings with a shout out to Dad. He likes that. And all you need to know is that we are set in 1899 in Kansas. Do I have any Kansans in here, or anybody who's got family in Kansas? Good. I couldn't cook, but I could sew. It would have been better the other way around. Luelle Morrissey had a face like a mud hen's backside, but everybody in Mercer County knew that she could make a good meal, even at the end of winter, when there was nothing left in the root cellar but tired apples. Folks talked about Luelle's knack for food, and at church socials, her pies were bid up past $3. A good cook is good value, said Ordell Wrightsbaugh, one of 3 ranchers courting her. By the time I was 9 years old, I could sew a straight seam, and at 15, I could make a hem stitch that no one could see, but nobody assigns value to what he can't see. I didn't have the right mind for putting meals on the table. Staring into the crusty frying pan and waiting for onions to color, I got bored. Hot and itchy, I would stroll out to lean on the garden fence and look at the dim horizon as if it might have changed in the last 10 minutes. The flat dirt, gray-brown, folded flat, the sky, gray-white, and behind me the onions burned. At night, Pa poked his fork at my stew, lumps of flour floating next to the shingles of black onion. If we auctioned you, you wouldn't bring in as much as a mule, he said. More than chickens, though, I said. How many chickens? 12, easy. I am good value, I said. For somebody who already ate, he said. Meals would have gone better if he'd just let Mama or one of my sisters cook, but he had ideas about things, and Tuesdays were my cooking days. He thought I'd learn. My family and the Hands, the years we had Hands, learned to avoid dinner on Tuesdays. Me, I was skinny as a whip and could get through the daylight hours on an apple. No matter what Pa would admit, I had my value. I could weigh a spool of thread in my hand and tell if it was rotten at the center. I could stitch a buttonhole in brand new denim, and I could mend a tear so that it blended right into the cloth around it, invisible even in church, when the eye needed something to rest on. There were other values. I was good with people, unlike my shy sisters. When Ernald Brown, who had already put 2 wives in the ground, twitched and snuffled his way up to Nassim Potter after church service, I saw that he was fixing to marry again. I hiked all the way to his place with a bunch of coneflowers he could give to Nassim. He gave me a nickel, the first coin I didn't have to draft on a cup and I had sense enough not to tell Pa about it. I was smart about Pa, too, and I could judge when he had drunk 1 glass of whiskey too many and was itching to hit something. My doughy sisters never learned to clear out of his path, but I could smell a beating was coming the same way that a person can smell rain. That's bad-looking leather, he'd say, looking at a patched harness. Cheap. Everything about it looks cheap. Then he'd raise his head and say, it's not one thing worth a tinker's dam on this place, or in this county, or in this state. The fury would sweep over him like storm clouds. Folks knew him as a joke teller, but he wasn't always amiable, and his jokes could turn rough in a hurry. Even Mama, so dim she never seemed to recognize anything, said Pa and I were cut from the same pie. Like him, I was restless all the time, ants under my skin, and a day spent plowing would leave me fretful with wanting something I couldn't put a name to. The prairie's rough grass surrounded us like a belt that kept out soft fabrics, sweet-smelling pillows, anything that might ease a life. No wonder Pa drank. When I trudged out to the barn, my eyes cut over our paltry 160 acres of wheat the same way his did. Everyone around us was buying up acreage before land prices went up again. Soon, ours would be the smallest farm in the county. It didn't need to be so. Pa could have borrowed money to expand. For pity's sake, the bank was loaning money to the Pecks, who hadn't met a payment in 5 years. The manager would have loaned to us. But Pa looked out to the west, toward what he didn't own, what nobody owned. He didn't want more of what he already had. He was squinting at the fence line when I came up to him one afternoon. He'd put his hat aside somewhere in the back of his shirt, bunched up out of his trousers. The man was careless, shedding things wherever he went, shoes and papers and tobacco. Mama spent her life picking up his litter. Myself, I would have let it lie. Feller dies and goes to the seat of judgment, he said, eyes trained on the blurred horizon. He didn't even look back to make sure it was me he was talking to. Jesus said, "You've got yourself a bad record. You've cheated, stolen, lied. You're going to have to go to hell." Feller falls down at the feet of the Lord. He cries and begs for mercy. It's true that I didn't lead a good life, but I wasn't all evil. I cared for my mama and gave to the poor. I gave money to your church. The Lord softens. All right, he says, I'll take mercy on you. You can start again, homesteading in Kansas. Feller stops crying, looks up at the face of the Lord. Is that spot in hell still open? Dare you to tell it to the preacher, I said. Not everybody wants to hear the truth, he said. Preacher says only the gospel is truth. This is a different gospel, Pa said, for those who have ears. Dare you to tell it to the visiting preacher. He's coming to dinner. Ma sent me out to fetch you. You're not cooking, are you? It's Thursday, I said. My sister May's turn. Lucky for him. Mama wants you to wear your Sunday shirt. Dad is going to church, he said. If I have to wear my Sunday shirt in my own house, maybe I will tell him my joke. He didn't get a chance, though. Reverend Farley had jokes of his own, the one about the lamb and the peacock, the one about the squirrel who went to Bible camp, the one about the 3 ministers who went to heaven. After a while, we stopped forcing ourselves to laugh, since our laughter made no difference to the Reverend. While May's good pot roast hardened in front of him, he planted an elbow on either side of the plate and said, Man finds himself at the pearly gates. The Lord says, Son, it's your day of reckoning. You lived a bad life. You smoked, you drank, you didn't do right in business. There's only one place for you to go. We know this one, Pa said. Reverend Farley didn't even pause. The man says, Remember when I saved that widow? Remember when I ran into the burning house and snatched up the baby? Doesn't that count for something? The Lord nods. You're right. Those things count for something. You can go to Wichita. The man says, Remember that $100 I stole? Into the quiet around the table, Pa said, We tell it different. I imagine so. Everyone loves this one in Texas. Mama got up a smile and shook her head. You're a regular theater. Do you come from Texas? I said. Girls in Mercer County didn't talk at table, and Pa's glance was sharp. I travel my emotion, not sure I'm where I'm from. I know where I'm going when the Lord tells me to hang up my spurs, though. You're not wearing spurs, Pa said. Where, Reverend? Said polite Mama. California, heaven on earth. I don't imagine that's part of your circuit, said Pa. I was ailing for a time, and I went to Los Angeles to recover my health. I don't mind telling you I'd go back, even if it meant falling sick again. What ailed you? Pa said. Tell us about California, I said at the same time. I could see that my chatter was nettling Pa, but he wouldn't lay a hand on any of us before company. Reverend Farley put on a sharp smile that didn't look right on a preacher. If California is not the promised land, it's the closest we'll see in this life. To walk in an orange grove is to be in Eden. The air smells sweet and tangy at the same time, and the leaves shine, and the oranges all but push themselves into your hands. Have you ever eaten an orange? Pa said, We see a few luxuries. We're not poor. Your mouth tingles, but the fruit is sweet, and so quenching you imagine you'll never be thirsty again. The flowers are tiny, but they put out a powerful scent. And then you get to the end of the grove, and the next thing you see is the ocean crashing onto sand. Salty soil kills most plants, Pa said. Guess your orange trees are different. Reverend Farley made a brushing motion. Maybe not exactly at the end of the growth, but close. What does it look like? I said. Reverend stopped talking, which amazed us all. He looked around the kitchen, eyes skidding over the freshly blacked cook stove and the magazine pictures Mama had put up on the walls, over the hard dirt floor and the pie safe with the weeping willow punched into its tin door. He picked up a white enamel pot lid with a blue rim and said, Hold this close to your eyes. When I held it up, he said, Closer, until the edge of the lid was practically in my eye. "What do you see?" he said. "The blue is wobbly, and then there's white over it. That's all." "That's close," he said, "except it's beautiful."